Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to Tony the Technician's channel. And today we're going to be going into my Matco tap and die set, as well as comparing it or kind of going over what a tap and die set is used for compared to a rethreading kit. Now, rethreading kits aren't as popular because a lot of people use taps and dies for the purpose of rethreading kits. But to do things correctly, you would use a rethreading kit actually probably more often, depending on what your job is, more than a tap and die set. So we're going to be going into what you're going to be using that rethreading kit for and a tap and die set. And then we're going to be taking a really close look at my tap and die set, and I'll explain some things throughout it. And then in another video, we'll go over the rethreading kit, and I really hope you guys enjoy. If you guys do, please make sure to hit that thumbs up. Leave a comment down in the comment section of your guys' thoughts or a tap and die set that you got, or if you own a rethreading kit. And as always, if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. We're going to get into my Matco tap and die set, which is 606 Tango Delta, and then I'm going to go into it as well as kind of explain the difference in between a tap and die set and a rethreading kit. So a lot of people, when they come across a bolt or a nut or a threaded portion of, let's say, part of an engine block, you have a threaded hole, a blind hole that you need to repair the threads. Most of the time, people are going to be trying to repair those holes with a tap and die set. Now, not that there's really anything wrong with that, but it's not necessarily the best for it, or necessarily the actual tool for it. This is the Matco Rethread Kit. This includes taps and dies just like a tap and die set would, but the designs are different and used for different purposes. So let's just open this up and kind of take a look at what we have here in this tap and die set. This one I do not believe is sold anymore from Matco. They have updated their kits and everything. This one's quite a few years old. So I believe right now on eBay and Amazon and everything, it's selling for like $100 to $200. I'm not sure what the price is when it was actually being sold by Matco, but that's what it's being sold for now. It does state that it's made in the USA. There are a couple items that don't state made in the USA, and I'll show those to you because they're kind of questionable. You can also get them specifically SAE or specifically metric. So most people would generally have a tap and die set, and they would go to repair the threads on this. They'd find the correct die and repair the threads. And then here you have your taps. And if you had a blind hole, you'd be trying to repair the thread with that. Well, in all actuality, that's what this kit is for. It has a file for cleaning up threads, and then you have your dies, which are very similar to a tap and die set, but obviously different because these are made specifically for cleaning up and repairing threads externally and internally. And you can tell that the taps are a different style as well. These are created to be able to go almost all the way to the bottom of a blind hole, whereas a lot of taps, depending on the style, you can't get all the way to the bottom of a blind hole depending on your tap style. But that's where this kit really shines in repairing threads, and this is actually used very often, so I'll be doing a review on this in the future as well, so stay tuned for that. But let's get into what this kit consists of and kind of what it would actually be used for. So here you can see all of the taps. You have a thread gauge and some tools for your taps, and then your dies here. And then on the back, this is actually a chart to help you drill the correct hole when going to create threads. So let's say you drill a hole into a block and you need the threads to be a certain size and pitch. This will help you decide what size you actually need to drill that hole out to, so you can get good threads for a good hold on whatever fastener you're inserting into that hole. So this is very handy. All of these taps, you have different pitches. You got more coarse and then fine threads over here. They do state they're made in the USA. And then same thing with the dies, if you can see that. But when it comes to the actual tools themselves, like this one, it does state Matco on it, but it doesn't state anywhere USA. And not that this tool doesn't work great, it does, it works just fine, but I don't see anywhere that says USA. And when it comes to looking at the quality of it compared to everything else in here, the quality does seem kind of questionable if you just look at it. There's a lot of blemishes and the chrome, but who knows? I'm unsure of. I'm not going to say that it's made in the USA, but I know as far as the actual taps and dies, they are made in the USA. You have a tap adapter here. This is a slick little tool. You can slip your smaller taps into here, tighten it down, and you can use it. I also did a video on different universal tap adapters where you can actually use it with a ratchet, which makes things much faster and easier. But this does state it is made in the USA, so that is nice. Same thing with the larger one, but as far as these main tools, I don't see anything as far as made in the USA. So when using taps and dies, what would you actually use them for if you're not just cleaning up threads on nuts, bolts, or holes in certain materials? So this is going to be for creating threads internally and externally. Internal threads, external threads. So let's say you wanted to create a threaded rod. You could get the rod that you need. You could find the tap that you want to create the thread size and pitch for, and you can create something like this. This is just the tightening rod for my intake for my carburetor. So you could take a bare rod and use a die and actually create your own threads, creating a rod just like this, or your own bolts or anything like that. So that's where dies would be used. And then as far as taps, let's say you have, let's just say this is a block. You could do it like this. It doesn't really matter. You're obviously going to get more threads into a block than you are going to be this very thin aluminum. So you would drill your hole, and after checking your chart and figuring out what fasteners you're going to be using and stuff like that with it, you would select your tap. You would insert it into your tool. After drilling your hole into your material, you would take your tap, insert it into that hole, and slowly start your threads. And about every 1 to 2 rotations, you want to go counterclockwise a half a turn to kind of clear out that debris. You want to use tap fluid as well. It's specifically for keeping this nice and cool and clearing out that debris when making your own threads, to make sure it doesn't gunk this up and cause any cross threading or messing up the threads or anything like that. So this is really nice. Now, like I said earlier, there is that other tool that I did a video on similar to this, which makes it a lot easier. But you definitely want to make sure that you're going perfectly straight. You don't want to be cockeyed or anything like that, creating messed up threads or an uneven hole, and then you can't thread anything into it anyways, and then you got to enlarge it or clean it out and do it all over. And you want to make sure that you're getting a good tap, so you have clean threads, so you have a good hold with that fastener that you're using. So tap and die is not necessarily used for cleaning up threads internally and externally. It is for creating them. Another nice thing here is the thread gauge. So this will help you determine what tap and die you need to use depending on what you plan on making. So this is really nice to have. Other than that, that's really all that's it. You have a couple different size tools here, different adapters. Another thing that you need to keep in mind, a way to save money when looking at tap and dies. If you're going to use it fairly often, I do not suggest getting a cheap set, something like Harbor Freight or anything like that. You want to stay away from that. Get a good quality set, but they do get expensive. So if you work specifically on SAE stuff or specifically on metric, you can buy kits just SAE or just metric. Or if you work on both, you want to make sure to get a kit that works with both. Other than that, you want to make sure that your tap and die set is always a harder material than what you're working with. If you work with a lot of aluminum, you could stick with a standard, they're usually cheaper, carbon steel tap and die set because it's going to be harder than aluminum and common metals, I should say. But when getting up into like stainless steel and stuff like that, you don't want to use a carbon steel. You want to make sure to step up to a high-speed steel, which is going to be a little bit more expensive, but it's going to get you through not just aluminum and your common metals, but up into stainless steel and those harder metals, because you don't want to destroy your taps and dies. You want to be able to create those threads. So you always want to make sure that your tap and die set is a harder material than what you're working with. Other than that, another reason you want to make sure you get a good kit is because most of the time when you are using this, you might not be in the best situation or best mood because of the situation you're in. So you don't want to go out and cheap yourself on a tap and die set and end up making yourself even more upset or putting yourself in an even worse situation because the cheap set actually did more damage than it did good. So keep that in mind. If there's anything I forgot to mention, which I'm sure there is, but I can't talk forever, so if there's anything that I forgot that's helpful to any others looking at buying a tap and die set, please drop it down in the comments for others to see. Other than that, if you guys enjoyed this video, please make sure to hit that thumbs up. Leave a comment down below of your guys' thoughts and what tap and die set you decided to go with and how it's doing. And as always, if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing.